Hello everyone, welcome back for another book review. So today we are talking about this one. So this is one of my mother-in-law's books. I don't think I ever would have bought this book personally, but we did keep a number of her books, and so some of them were like, I'm gonna read it before I decide if I'm gonna keep or toss. This is, well, not toss, but donate, because it's not a topic I care about, and this is probably gonna be one of those. So this is Being in Balance, 9 Principles for Creating Habits to Match Your Desires by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. So this is a very small book, and I must say, as for like the physical of this book, it is fabulous. The inside of this is colorful and pretty and just very pleasing to the eye. I like that it's small. It is a squishy cover, and sometimes it's the little things, but a squishy cover is fun. And this is one of those where they did a really good job in like the editing and designing the interior of this book, where the colors don't really take away from the book. The little illustrations here and there don't really take away from it, which is something I really enjoyed about this. So the premise of this book is basically the law of attraction. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm not really a part of that community. It's a very fine line I found between law of attraction and living in reality. What I mean is that you kind of discount a lot of things when you're entering into this community, because like this book, and I've got an extended discussion coming on this one because there is quite a bit in this book that is problematic, but it tells you that you shouldn't hate entire groups of people. Good in theory, but like the Nazis exist. I don't like any of them. I don't think any of us should probably like them. And also even like modern groups like the AFA, where they tell you that you're not allowed to adopt outside of your own. AKA you can't have interracial adoptions, let alone marriages. Then you just have a lot of really problematic groups, and it's like, you know what? All serial killers, same category. Don't like them. They're messed up. I don't have love for them, I'm sorry. Now on the opposite spectrum, obviously you shouldn't like hate all Jewish people. It's simply because of what they are. It's more of what you stand for. Like there's a slight difference in things, and you can kind of tell when this book was written. This came out in 2006. And the world, especially here in America, was a very hostile place in a lot of ways. This was written within 5 years of 9/11 happening. The country was reeling at that time. And so you can tell a lot of this book is from that time frame. And that's why we need to always read books with that in mind of when it was published, because that does give a little context clue of where the author's coming from. Because there's a lot of discussion on anti-terrorism and why we shouldn't judge groups of people, which is like true. Americans tended to have a bit of a chip on the shoulder when it came to certain parts of the world and unnecessary wars and things like that, and you know, the author goes into that. But the author also goes into things like saying that your life is your fault, basically. At one part he says that your traumas are what make you perfect. And I'm like, I don't think anybody who's gone through severe trauma, whether it's neglect, physical, emotional, mental abuse, whether it's severe poverty, whether it's medical traumas, like there are so many things that can happen to people, like losing your parents, having a sibling brutally murdered. Like there are so many things that can happen that are traumatic, and to say that it makes you perfect is just icky. I don't like it. It also goes on to say some other problematic things, and it's not this book specifically. It is really big in the law of attraction community. So just kind of keep that in mind, but these were just some of the parts of this book in particular that stood out, but it does tend to be really common in that entire community. He also tells you that you are in control of your health, and that there's kind of an underlying thing of like, if you're unhealthy, it's your fault, which as somebody who has medical things that will not be cured, how is that my fault? That's problematic. And also goes on to say that you should like eat intuitively, and that you can solve addiction by saying you love it. There's a specific phrase that I'll talk about in the extended discussion, but like literally you say this little prayer, because it is a Christian book, so that's also not my thing, but he literally tells you to say this prayer and then go do the thing. And then eventually you will learn that it's bad for you. And I'm like, that's not how addiction works. Whether it's food addiction, which he talks about, or it's, because he tells you to like intuitively eat, which doesn't always work. It can sort of, But dieting is like a really delicate line for everybody. I'm not really huge on to believing that any one person is right on the topic, but also intuitively eating doesn't always work, especially when you're battling other things like depression and anxiety, where food can help trigger the happy stuff in the brain. And it's a really easy coping mechanism, but long term doesn't help things because then you gain weight and it makes it harder to exercise. It's a snowball effect. And so it's just like, okay, that's not how addiction works. And it was putting obesity and food addiction in the same category as cigarettes and cocaine, which was interesting. And that you're supposed to say this thing, and I was thinking of my mother-in-law, because again, this was her book, and it was like, if this was your method of trying to help yourself to quit smoking, this would not work. That's not how addiction works. And never in this book does he tell you to go out and get professional help. In the instance of addiction, he doesn't tell you to go to rehab, seek out counseling, try to mention it to your doctor. Because things like smoking, there are medications that can help to kind of ease that process. It's still challenging, but he doesn't mention any of that at all. God's just gonna magically cure you if you decide to be in alignment with him, basically. Which is the thing I didn't love. I don't like Christian books. I actively will get rid of books like that. It's not something I care about. People have varying opinions and experiences with Christianity. I'm in the camp that I don't want anything really to do with it, so I will actively probably not keep this book because there's a lot of God's will and God promotes this way and it's all God's love. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's not exactly how my gods are, so no. He also says that health things you can just change yourself. Even high blood pressure and different things, if you just intuitively eat and you just focus on being healthy, you'll just be healthy. That's not how it works. He also kind of focuses that your abundance and your prosperity in life is just your mindset, and that if you just believe that you can live this way, it has nothing to do with how you were raised. It doesn't matter your social status at all, and I'm like, that's a privileged statement. Because yes, you can get out of poverty, you can make progress in this world and in this life, but to say that that doesn't have anything to do with it, somebody who, and he has 8 kids, so I'm like, dude, you are not hurting for cash. You actively chose to have 8 children. So you probably started off at a certain level of privilege where a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck and are trying to pick the cheapest meals possible and have no idea how they're going to get their kids new shoes for the year, or how they're going to fix their car that's going to be $300 worth of damage because something broke inside. Those people, it's really hard to get out of poverty when you're still going into debt each month. And it's a thing. You can get through it. There are ways, but it's very difficult. And to just say if you think positively, basically it's gonna fix that, that's not the case. He also actively tells you that using verbiage like battles and stuff like that is really negative and harmful, and that you just shouldn't do that because it's gonna have the opposite effect of bringing you into balance. And that's the biggest thing about this book. It's supposed to be promoting balance when in reality it's swaying the opposite way. It's not aiming for balance, it's aiming for one specific way. The entire time I was reading it, I kept thinking that it's this isn't the yin and yang balance that you're thinking that it is. This is love and light only. There is no space for darkness at all. And actually one part of the book tells you specifically that darkness is bad. And I'm like, I'm just I read that and I was immediately thinking about how he was well, nothing good ever comes out of the dark and the gloom, and I'm just I just read so many books about the underworld journey and the goddesses that rule over darkness, and I'm and the shadow self with Carl Jung and all of that, dude, no. And that's why I hate these books. I don't like this huge focus that everything is your fault, your thoughts create your reality. And it's there's nuance there. It does count, but also you need to balance that with the reality of what you're living and what can you do. And not just, oh, if I think positively, it's gonna fix it. You have to have real world action behind it. And the author doesn't really go into that detail at all. The thing with the law of attraction and the positive thinking love and light crowd, whether or not it has Wiccan undertones or it has Christian undertones like this book, they all kind of come about the same way. And that is that there is no space in the world for the bad. That the only way to live a happy, prosperous life is to focus solely on the good. And unfortunately, that's just not how the world works. And I had hoped for better out of this book, being focused on balance, but again, I really didn't know much going into this book. So if you're into the love and light and law of attraction, and you don't mind Christian undertones and mentions constantly, this will probably be a good book for you, but for me, it's not. I was hoping for something a little different, and so if my husband doesn't want this book, which I don't think he's going to, it's probably going to get donated because it's not one that I really care to keep. That is going to be it for this video. Like I said, I do have an extended discussion where I have a number of notes that I have taken from this book, and I'll be discussing it over there. So for my patrons, do keep an eye out for that. Speaking of which, thank you to my patrons. You are what's helping to make this all possible, and I am super grateful for all of you. And if you would like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. I usually post a few times a week on each of the different tiers, so there's always something going on over there, so do make sure to watch out for that. As for here on the main channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.